No one ever really noticed her. Not truly. Every evening at 6:30 p.m., just as the last suit-clad executives filed out with buzzing phones and to-go coffees, she would quietly step into the building. Her name was Rosa Alvarez. She wore the same soft-soled shoes that never echoed through the marble hallways, the same navy blue uniform with bleach-faded knees, and carried the same battered tote bag held together by a safety pin and prayer. To most people in the building, she was part of the background, the cleaning crew, the after-hours. The help. She didn't make noise. She didn't make waves. She just worked. Office 1902, the corner suite with the skyline view and the $9,000 ergonomic desk chair, was always her last stop of the night. That office belonged to Mr. Gregory Lane, senior partner, award-winning strategist, Harvard graduate, and a man who once gave a TED talk about emotional intelligence in leadership. Gregory had never spoken to Rosa, not once. He arrived every morning at 6:45 sharp and left promptly at 6:15. She entered 15 minutes later. Their paths never crossed, and if they had, he probably wouldn't have recognized her anyway. What Gregory never realized, what no one in the company did, was that Rosa didn't just clean the office. She cared for it. She wiped the dust from the corner of his framed family photo, even when the frame was cracked and he never noticed. She refilled the candy jar he occasionally left out with the cheap mints he seemed to like. She realigned his pens each night, placing the blue one at the top, because she had once overheard a junior associate mention Gregory hated when the colors were out of order. She picked up the post-it notes that fell behind the monitor, stacked the loose change he scattered on the windowsill, and always emptied the tiny trash can with the same white-gloved grace she gave to the office lobby. Rosa Alvarez had a quiet sense of ritual, a kind of invisible integrity, and not once in 12 years had anyone thanked her for it. She had seen the company through 3 CEOs, 4 rebrandings, a scandal, 2 remodels, and 1 office fire that left the East Wing smelling of smoke for 6 weeks. She had watched interns rise to managers and managers rise to nothing. She had overheard affairs unravel, dreams collapse, and promotions whispered about in the echo of empty glass rooms. Rosa knew more about the company's internal culture than HR ever would. Not because she was nosy, but because people let their guard down when they thought no one important was listening. Rosa listened. She always listened. And she carried those stories home each night to a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood the executives would only pass on their way to the airport. There, in that small space, she kept a handwritten notebook filled with things she had heard. Not gossip, but observations, struggles, triumphs, patterns. The way Mr. Barlow clenched his fist when reading bad news, the tremble in Ms. Lee's voice when she took late phone calls in the hallway, the note of desperation that always appeared in Gregory Lane's voicemail recordings when he thought no one had responded. Rosa wrote it all down, not to expose anyone, not to profit, but because she believed people mattered even when they didn't see each other, and in the privacy of her small kitchen, she read back those notes sometimes, as if studying the shape of a world that never acknowledged her. Her son, David, once asked her why she never took a better job. "Something in the day, Mama. Something with sunlight." But Rosa would just smile and say, "People reveal who they really are when they think no one is watching. I see them clearer in the dark." David didn't understand, not really, until it was too late. The night Rosa collapsed, she had just finished scrubbing the bathroom floor on the 17th floor. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. She thought it was just exhaustion. She told herself she would rest when she got home. But when she reached Gregory's office that evening, she hesitated. She leaned on the edge of his desk for a moment, then gently placed his photo frame back in position and sank into the guest chair across from where he usually sat. No one knows exactly how long she sat there before she fell to the floor. The security footage simply showed her nodding off and never getting back up. The next morning, Gregory arrived to find paramedics outside his office. They asked him if he knew the woman's name. He blinked. "What woman?" he asked, and that was the first time he learned it. Her name was Rosa Alvarez. Gregory didn't think about the woman again until later that afternoon. He had brushed past the paramedics that morning, offered them a tight nod, and asked his assistant to delay his 8 a.m. meeting by 15 minutes. That was it. He didn't ask for more information, not out of cruelty, but because death had become procedural to him. People died. Accidents happened. HR handled the fallout. Life moved on. That's how it always worked in the corridors of corporate ambition. But as the day wore on, something kept tugging at his attention. Her name. Rosa Alvarez. It echoed in his mind with a strange, persistent familiarity. He couldn't place it. He had never said it out loud, never heard anyone else say it either. And yet there was something haunting in how it sounded, like it had always been there, just out of reach. By 4:30 p.m. he finally asked. He stood outside the janitorial wing, a hallway he hadn't walked through in years. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and floor polish. He knocked on the open door, startling the middle-aged supervisor seated behind a cluttered desk. "Can you tell me about Rosa Alvarez?" he asked. The woman blinked. "Rosa, you mean Ms. Alvarez? The one who—" She trailed off, gesturing toward the hallway, where a yellow cleaning cart stood abandoned, mop bucket half full. "Yes," Gregory said quietly. "The woman from this morning." The supervisor straightened. "She worked here for over a decade, never missed a shift. Never filed a complaint. Always early, always kind, quiet but sharp. Everyone liked her." She hesitated. Most didn't know her well. She didn't talk about her personal life much, but she was consistent. You could count on her. Gregory nodded, unsure of what he was even doing there. "Did she have family?" "A son," the woman replied. "David. He's the one who came to collect her things this morning." Gregory paused. "Here? He came here?" The supervisor frowned. "Yes, he sat in your office for a while, said she used to talk about it." That stopped him. "Talk about my office?" "Yeah." Said it was her favorite one to clean. Gregory left without saying another word. That night he stayed late, not because of a deadline or an earnings report, but because he couldn't bring himself to leave. He kept looking at the chair across from his desk, the one Rosa had apparently sat in during her final moments. He tried to remember if anything looked different. Had she touched anything? Moved something? Had she seen something in those final moments that he hadn't? Eventually he opened his desk drawer and noticed something odd. The pens. They were all aligned, perfectly. Blue on top, black in the middle, red at the bottom. He stared at them for a long time. No one else touched his desk. No one. The next day he called HR and asked if there would be a memorial or service. The rep on the other end sounded surprised. "We haven't planned anything," she said. "Janitorial staff are typically contracted, not company employees." "But she worked here for 12 years, Gregory said. "Yes, but through a third party. Legally, she wasn't one of us." Gregory hung up without responding. He spent the next 20 minutes staring out his window, watching the street below. People passed like shadows, rushing, scrolling, talking, not seeing, just like he had for years. He thought of all the days Rosa must have entered his space, dusted his life, reordered his mess, and left without acknowledgement. He had never once thanked her, never once noticed her, until she was gone. That Friday, a small obituary ran in a local community paper, the kind that didn't show up in his usual newsfeed. But one of the junior analysts, a woman named Priya, left the clipping on his desk. No note, just the folded page. Rosa's photo was in black and white. She looked tired but warm, her eyes carrying that weary grace that came from surviving more than most would ever know. The obituary mentioned her son, David, and a memorial service scheduled for Sunday at a modest church on the west side of the city. Gregory wasn't sure why he went. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, and he would never admit this out loud, maybe it was because no one else from the company would. The church was small, with stained glass windows that filtered the afternoon light into fractured rainbows across the pews. There were no expensive floral arrangements, no slideshow, just a wooden casket and a handful of folding chairs filled with neighbors, friends, and people Gregory had never seen. He sat near the back, awkward in his tailored suit, feeling like an imposter at a gathering of the invisible. When David stood to speak, he held a small notebook in his hands, one that looked old and softened by time. My mother didn't have many possessions, he began. But she had this, her notebook. She used to write things in it every night when she got home from work. I never knew what it was until now. He paused, flipping to a page. She wrote down things people said, not secrets, just moments, things they didn't think anyone heard. She believed every voice mattered, even when no one was listening. He read aloud. June 14th. Mr. Lane left early. He looked tired. I realigned his pens, blue first, always blue first. September 3rd. Ms. Lee cried in the hallway. I didn't ask, just left tissues on her desk. October 29th. I saw a new intern offer his lunch to the security guard. Small kindness worth writing down. David looked up. She believed in documenting goodness, in noticing what others missed. She believed that no one should be invisible forever. Gregory couldn't breathe. His name. In her notebook. He had been seen. Not judged. Not resented. Seen. Gregory didn't leave the church right after the service ended. He lingered in the back, out of place among the mourners, unsure of what to say, or if he had the right to say anything at all. The truth was, he hadn't expected to be affected. He told himself he was only attending out of professional respect, a gesture, maybe even penance. But when David read that notebook aloud, something cracked open in Gregory that he didn't know was even there. It wasn't just guilt, it was grief, confused and unearned. He hadn't known Rosa, not her voice, not her laugh, not her story, but somehow her absence now weighed more than her presence ever had. As the room emptied, Gregory finally approached the front, where David was quietly speaking to a group of elderly neighbors. They exchanged hugs and quiet condolences. Gregory stood back, waiting until the others had stepped away, then offered a gentle nod. "You must be David," he said. David turned, visibly tired but polite. "Yes, and you are?" "Gregory Lane. I work at the firm where your mother cleaned." Recognition flickered in David's eyes. He extended a hand. "I've heard that name before. Thank you for coming. Not many from that building did." Gregory hesitated, then said, "She wrote about me, in the notebook." David nodded. "She did. She wrote about all of you." "I never knew," Gregory admitted. "Not her name, not her life. I never asked." "She wouldn't have told you even if you did," David replied gently. "My mother wasn't the kind to make herself the center of anything. She believed in showing up, not being seen." Gregory's eyes dropped to the notebook in David's hands. "Would it be all right if I read some of it? Just a few entries?" David studied him for a moment, then slowly nodded. "Come by tomorrow. We kept her apartment just for a few more days. It's not far from downtown." Gregory agreed without thinking, and for the first time in years, he cleared his schedule without hesitation. The next morning he drove himself. No chauffeur, no assistant, no coffee order waiting in the cup holder. He parked on a side street filled with cracked pavement and sagging power lines. Rosa's building was a faded brick structure with narrow stairs and no elevator. He climbed the 4 flights in silence, past peeling paint and the sounds of televisions through thin walls, until he reached apartment 4C. David answered in a simple t-shirt and jeans. "Come in," he said, gesturing toward the modest living room. The furniture was second-hand but neatly arranged. A soft floral scent lingered in the air. The light filtering through the window was gentle, the kind of light that seemed to land softly, as if it respected the quiet of the place. On the coffee table lay the notebook. It was thick, bound in worn leather, its corners bent and pages marked with small tabs. David sat across from him as Gregory slowly opened to a random page. March 2nd. Mr. Lane left his cufflink under the desk again. Picked it up. Still hasn't realized I've been returning them through the drawer for months. He turned another. May 15th, elevator broke. Had to climb 17 floors, thought my lungs would burst, but the office smelled like lavender that day. Must have been someone's perfume. It made me forget the pain for a while. And another. August 7th. I saw Mr. Barlow staring out the window. He looked so still, like if no one reminded him to breathe, he might forget. I dusted around him quietly. Gregory felt something rise in his chest, not just sorrow, but a sense of loss far more personal than he expected. These were moments, real, human moments, and she had been their witness, the invisible thread stitching together the lives of people who had never once seen her. He looked up. This should be published. David raised an eyebrow. Published? This notebook. It's a lens on humanity, on compassion. She saw more in us than we saw in ourselves. David leaned back in his chair. You really think anyone would care about a janitor's notebook? Gregory didn't hesitate. Yes, especially now. He paused, then added, I'd like to help. Not for the company, not for branding, for her. David was silent for a moment. She would have liked that. Over the next few days, Gregory returned. Not as a boss, not as a partner, not as the man in the corner office, but simply as someone trying to understand. He helped sort her belongings, learned about her immigration story, how she came to the country at 17 alone, working jobs no one else wanted. He saw the photos of her and David from birthdays and school graduations, holidays celebrated with homemade decorations. He learned how she saved every extra dollar for his education, how she walked to work for 5 years before affording a used car, how, when her back started giving out, she never told anyone because she couldn't afford time off. One night, as he and David packed boxes, Gregory found a small envelope tucked behind a stack of books. It had no name on it, just the words, in case someone finally asks. Inside was a single page, and it read, If you are reading this, you must be someone who decided to see me. Thank you. I wasn't invisible. I was just quiet. But I watched, I noticed, and I loved this life more than anyone knew. Please, keep noticing the people no one sees. That's where the light is. Gregory sat back, the note trembling in his hand. It was the most human thing he had ever read. Gregory Lane had spent his entire career chasing visibility, stage lights, press releases, keynote speeches, corner offices. But for the first time in his life, he found meaning in something no one else had seen. Rosa Alvarez had lived in the periphery of his world for over a decade, and yet her quiet dignity now stood taller in his mind than any CEO he'd ever admired. He left that apartment not with a sense of closure, but with a mission, one he didn't fully understand yet but couldn't ignore either. The next morning, he didn't go to his office. Instead, he sat at a public library, notebook in hand, flipping back through Rosa's pages. Each entry told a story, not just about the people she worked near, but about the deep empathy she carried. He saw kindness in moments he would have forgotten. People offering coffee to janitors, quietly covering for late colleagues, picking up trash in the hallway, all recorded by a woman who believed that witnessing was a sacred act. And more than anything, he realized, Rosa had preserved the soul of the place, the parts that no shareholder would ever value. By the following week, Gregory had made 2 decisions. First, he contacted a small independent publishing company run by a friend from grad school, someone with enough reach to take a project like this seriously. Second, he called an all-hands staff meeting, the first he had ever initiated that wasn't about quarterly targets or mergers. The conference room was packed. Some employees looked confused, others curious. Gregory stood at the front, no slideshow, no charts, just him holding Rosa's notebook. I want to tell you a story, he began, about a woman most of us never knew, Rosa Alvarez. She cleaned this building for 12 years, every floor, every trash bin, every office, including mine. She died last week, and I didn't know her name until the paramedics told me. The room shifted, heads tilted, phones were quietly set down. She left behind a notebook, Gregory continued. In it, she wrote about you, not your mistakes, not your gossip, your moments, the ones you thought no one saw, the day you helped someone carry boxes, the morning you cried in the elevator, the time you gave a stranger your lunch. Rosa saw it all, and she wrote it down because she believed it mattered. Silence filled the room. For once, no one was multitasking, no one was checking emails. She believed people deserved to be seen, he said, and frankly, we failed her in that. I failed her, so we're going to change that." He paused, placing the notebook on the table. "Starting today, the company will fund a memorial scholarship in her name for the children of service workers, janitors, cafeteria workers, cleaners, people like Rosa, who keep this building standing but never get invited to sit at this table." He looked around the room. "And we're going to publish this book, not because it'll go viral, but because it deserves to exist, because someone who was always in the background chose to leave behind a record of quiet beauty." The applause was slow at first, hesitant, but it grew, and with it, something shifted in the room. For many of them, it was the first time they felt something human in that space. In the months that followed, the change was real. The book was published under the title The Notebook of Rosa Alvarez. Things I Noticed While No One Was Looking. It was modest, printed with a plain linen cover and no author photo. But it resonated. Quietly, steadily it spread, among readers tired of noise, among workers who saw themselves in her entries, and even among executives who had long forgotten what it meant to feel humbled. Gregory kept a copy in his briefcase at all times. He also started arriving to work 15 minutes earlier than usual, just in time to pass the new cleaning staff on their way in. He learned their names. He thanked them. One day, he noticed a sticky note on his monitor that hadn't been there the night before. It read, "Blue pens on top, right? We've got you, Mr. Lane." No signature, just a smiley face drawn in pencil. Rosa's story didn't end in a headline. It wasn't turned into a movie. But it quietly transformed a space, a company, and a man who once thought emotional intelligence could be taught in boardrooms. She hadn't needed a spotlight. Her life was the message. And Gregory, who had once lived among clouds of ambition and isolation, had finally come down to earth. He began volunteering on weekends, tutoring immigrant children in math and language. He visited janitorial offices in other buildings, thanking the people he used to walk past without a glance. He created mentorship programs for overlooked staff, funding development workshops that focused not on climbing ladders, but on being seen at every step. He visited Rosa's grave once a month, always bringing the same thing, a fresh notebook. He would sit, read her old entries, and then write his own. Not grand confessions, just small moments, the kind Rosa would have noticed. April 3rd. Building security helped a lost intern find her way. Didn't ask for thanks, just smiled and waved her in. May 12th. Carla from finance stayed late to help clean up after the volunteer drive. No one asked her to. June 21st. I passed a man on the street carrying groceries in the rain. I offered him my umbrella. He laughed and said, "No one ever offers help out here." Rosa would have. He wrote because he had learned something Rosa always knew. The world doesn't need more leaders shouting into megaphones. It needs more quiet witnesses, more people who look and truly see. A year passed. The building where Rosa Alvarez had once quietly scrubbed corners and emptied wastebaskets had changed in ways she'd never imagined. And yet, in a way, it had only begun to reflect what she had always seen. Her presence, once invisible, now lingered in everything. In the hallway bulletin board, where employees pinned up notes of gratitude to each other. In the weekly Human Moments email, where stories like Mark from IT offered his bonus to help a co-worker in crisis, or Karen from maintenance fixed the office coffee machine with a paperclip and pure will, were celebrated. In the new plaque outside the janitorial lounge that simply read, "This space is dedicated to Rosa Alvarez, who saw us when we didn't see ourselves." Gregory stood in front of that plaque one morning, holding his usual cup of black coffee, the same kind Rosa used to sweep past every night. He touched the cool metal gently, then turned to head upstairs, nodding to the new janitor, a young woman named Alina. She smiled and waved back. He had taken to learning their names, not out of obligation, but because he'd finally understood something fundamental. People matter most when you don't think you need them. Later that day, a small padded envelope arrived on his desk. It was addressed in handwritten script, with no return address. Inside was a letter, along with a photo. The letter read, "Mr. Lane, I don't know if you remember me, but I used to be a receptionist on the 9th floor. I quit 3 years ago after a difficult divorce and a health crisis. I was at my lowest. I came back recently for a meeting, and I saw the changes in the building. I saw Rosa's name. I saw people holding the door for the janitor, someone helping a new employee with directions, and your face as you thanked the cleaning staff by name. I heard someone say, "Rosa would have liked that." She was my friend. She once left a note in my drawer after I cried in the bathroom. It said, "You are allowed to feel broken, but you are not alone." I never forgot that. Thank you for keeping her spirit alive. LJ. Gregory leaned back in his chair and stared at the photo. It was of Rosa. She was laughing, fully, deeply. A real, open laugh. She was sitting on a park bench beside David, holding a sandwich in one hand and gesturing animatedly with the other. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. There was a looseness to her posture, a lightness Gregory had never associated with her. In his mind, she had always been quiet, composed, background. But here she was whole. And in that moment, Gregory realized he had been mourning a fragment, a silhouette, the idea of Rosa. But this photo, this radiant, unguarded image, gave her back her humanity in full. She had loved, she had struggled, she had lived. In the final pages of Rosa's notebook, the ones Gregory hadn't read until now, there was an entry, dated only 3 weeks before her death. It was brief. "I wonder if anyone will remember me. I don't need a statue. I don't want a parade. Just one person. One person who really saw me." Gregory closed the notebook with trembling hands. "You got more than one, Rosa," he whispered. And then, slowly, he turned to a fresh page in his own leather-bound journal, a habit he had picked up since the first day he opened hers. He began to write. July 5th, Rosa Alvarez changed this company. She changed me. She taught us that kindness doesn't need recognition to matter. That presence is its own kind of power. That a life can echo long after it's gone, if you live it quietly, but with love. He paused, then added, "She cleaned our floors, but more than that, she polished our souls." And so, the world continued. Busy people rushed to their elevators. Coffee was spilled, papers were lost, promotions were granted. But somewhere in one quiet corner of a tall, bustling building, a notebook sat on a shelf behind glass, not as a monument, but as a mirror, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary lives belong to those we almost didn't notice. But now, finally, and forever, we do.